directions. And this is, to me,
Okay.
this is all.
Well, because I'm thinking in terms of the board strategy. So we actually have one technology that ticks off lots of boxes for lots of different kinds of business. So it seems like we're siloing the startup strategy in terms of classical businesses, like the music is separate from the video, is separate from the art, because traditionally they're sold in separate shops. But actually how we're building the technology is we have one technology for all the things.
Mm-hmm.
So when Darryl's saying he's into music and Eric's saying he's into art, actually Jim and Gary and Steve are building the same thing for all of them. I definitely think there's a seed of how we could make our go-to-market strategy and our communication much more efficient and effective around that, rather than we're having four different things, reinvent the wheel 3 different times. We're actually doing the same thing for all of them.
Yeah, but what's unique about this effort with the blockchain, art on the blockchain, that it's ultimately the goal is that it's a protocol and that it's not blockchain specific. And this is more of a requirement of Eric's, that okay, sure, now it's working on our chain, but he envisions it to be working on Ethereum, working on Telos, working on Holochain, all of those. So he's at the mindset that he just wants to kind of get the process going, but ultimately it's there's no one blockchain or entity has control of the whole landscape. It's very malleable, and people can go wherever they want and be able to participate in art on the blockchain.
Oh, and here, speak of the devil.
Yes,
Eric.
Hey, Eric, welcome.
Hi.
We have a few new guests with us today, and Gary and I were getting them up to speed on our efforts for art on the blockchain.
Sorry I'm late. Hi everybody.
Yes, and Eric, I kind of felt like I'm down in the weeds now in the details of the contract, and I'm not really thinking right now about how do we present this thing at the high level, and I suggested that you're the high level person on the project, being the visionary and all. And so could you give your elevator pitch for art on the blockchain?
Yeah. Hi guys. We've been I guess working on this since last July, and I think art in the blockchain, this specific group, is more of like a speculative research group at this point. We're trying to understand how we can use different models and technology to create a set of protocols for defining how art can function using distributed technology. I wouldn't say that we're actually building something that is real or going to necessarily work, because we're totally reliant on the R-Chain ecosystem. And R-Chain, like basically our project is only going to be as real as R-Chain is, and R-Chain is definitely not ready for prime time yet. And so I think about this as more of a research group than actually something that we're building that other artists are necessarily going to be able to use in the immediate short-term future. And in a lot of ways, I think that's better, because this entire space is speculative, right? It's just there's a bunch of people in the space that are promoting themselves as if they've built products that are legitimate and they're ready to ship, and built on stable platforms that aren't totally alpha, in their development. And so we're approaching this, I guess, from 2 levels, really. My background is in art and media and theory. And, you know, Jim and Gary and Steve have, you know, a deep experience with decentralized technologies, and they really understand the art chain ecosystem. And sort of we're trying to find an equilibrium between those two ideas to sort of model something that could, in theory, work for actual artists, as opposed to people that are doing this kind of crypto art thing, which is not what we're interested in here. Does that make any sense?
It does. Thanks, Eric. Appreciate it. Nikki, as an actual artist, do you want to introduce yourself and maybe kind of tell us a bit about what you're interested in?
Yeah, my name is Nicolette. I live in Florida, and I specialize in vaporwave art. When I was 17, I started a page that blew up fairly quickly because of the community that I was in, which was art and memes and anything existential. So I kind of based my art around those themes, and next thing you know, I reached 20K and had this audience based in this community, and made a lot of important connections and things like that that helped me understand just like kind of issues that we have in society that revolve around important things. Yeah, sorry.
No, it's okay. So basically,
Yeah, I just get really anxious over the phone.
yeah, don't worry about it. So basically, like, you were blowing up, and then basically Facebook's algorithm pulled the rug out from underneath you. Is that a fair assessment
Yeah,
of the?
yeah, basically. And then after that happened, yeah, it just made it really hard to get my art out there. I had to pretty much just kind of like know people, and everything was just kind of like one-on-one. Didn't really have a platform after that.
Okay. Cool.
So would it be fair to say you're looking for technologies that can re-platform you
Yeah,
and
definitely.
heal type of thing?
Totally. I mean, well, I mean, there's lots of people right now that are creating digital gallery spaces. There's you know, the sort of litany of digital art institutions that are promoting artists that work exclusively online right now. Transfer Gallery just launched a new project called whatthefuck.now, or yeah, WTF.n, I think WTF.now or something like that. There's, have you heard of anything like oh gosh, well, The Wrong? Are you familiar with The Wrong?
No.
Yeah, so these are all things that maybe might help you sort of connecting with online communities that exist to exhibit art. I mean, vaporwave is obviously a huge field, and I think, you know, it permutates in lots of different ways and exists in lots of different communities. I definitely wouldn't recommend relying on Facebook exclusively to promote your art, but I would recommend like looking at things like Rhizome or The Wrong, which is a huge decentralized network of artists based all over the world that do annual exhibitions, you know, doing interactive video and net art. There is, you know, the whole history of net art is kind of like a big deal. You know, Rhizome created a whole net art anthology through the New Museum. I'm thinking of it starts with a D. They do like a digital Diamoto. You familiar with that?
No, I'm not.
All right. So I mean, these are just things that I think would be really worthwhile to check out. As far as,
could you post some links in our Discord chat with?
Yeah, that would be great.
sure. Yeah, totally. I'd be happy to. You know, I mean, this is kind of my background, you know, sort of working at the intersection of art and technology and media, and like, you know, there's lots and lots of organizations and places that you can go to connect with communities that are doing this in different ways. I don't know anything about your art or what type of vaporwave you're doing, or whether it connects to any of these other histories in art or technology, but you know, I'm sure that there's an audience for what you do, and so I think exploring other communities that are doing this in different ways, you know, may also give you other ideas about how you can recontextualize your work so it can speak to these other audiences. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
I hope this is helpful. I don't want to.
No, yeah, definitely. I wasn't even aware that there were like other art communities like that where I could build a platform.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't think about it as building a platform as much as connecting with other places that have audiences.
Mm-hmm.
And like, you know, they oftentimes have things like open calls that you can apply to. I wouldn't recommend reaching out to them, like cold calling them and being like, hey, help me build my platform. They'll probably ignore you.
Right.
But you know, they oftentimes have things like open calls, which, you know, will help get your work out there into new audiences that are more based, you know, in like the kind of coastal art communities and like academic spaces, you know.
Okay, yeah.
So when you say vaporwave, are you making like GIFs? Are you making memes? Is that what you're doing?
No, like I'm making actual vaporwave art. It kind of like varies. It depends on like what the person wants. Sometimes it's like profile pictures, like cover art. I don't know. I would have to like show you. It's really hard to explain my artwork.
Yeah,
It's really
Why don't you
it's
post?
really obscure.
Why don't you post a link
Yeah.
to our Discord? I'm in the middle of finishing my MFA thesis exhibition, and I had installed the exhibition for one day before everything got shut down, and so I'm actually in the process of virtualizing my entire exhibition. I'm going to be announcing it tomorrow, and I've actually built a whole web VR gallery to show the work that we've been doing here and some of my other projects related to the work that we've been doing in this group.
Cool.
Which chat on Discord?
We're in the art and blockchain. I actually don't have Discord open right now. Let me open it up.
Yeah, there's the collab group, and then there's a channel called Blockchain Art within the collab.
All right.
So, online art resources. Wrong. Wrong Biennale, Diamoda, Rhizome, art. And if you're familiar with the term, when I use the term net art, right?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So Rhizome's got a fabulous like net art anthology where you can look kind of like older net art that was designed for older browsers. And then, you know, there's a few galleries worth checking out, like Transfer Gallery and Bitforms, or is like another. These are like big kind of like, these are like very high level like new media galleries, you know. But it's just worth checking out because you can find other people and other things connected to these spaces that are doing interesting work. Let's see, you're in Florida. I don't really know anything in Florida, to be honest. I heard there's some cool stuff in Miami.
Yeah, honestly, the aesthetic down here, like the architecture and the neon lights and stuff, that's like really vaporwave. So like I walk outside my house and it's vaporwave.
Nice.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, definitely post some stuff in here. If I think of some other things, I'll definitely post them as well.
Yeah, I sent a link in this chat. I don't know if it went through.
Leave milk. Is this your Facebook?
It's the Facebook page that I have.
Oh. Okay.
And Nikki was verifiably one of the very first vaporwave people in the scene. I mean, Nikki, when did you start? Like 2011 or something? 2012?
I started the page in 2013 or 14, but I was in the community for like 2 years before that. And I was made an admin on Cream de la Meme, which was like a really big meme page at the time that was hacked. And then that's what I basically used to boost my audience.
Yeah, and there wasn't really any vaporwave before 2011.
Yeah, no.
So you were actually one of the first people to do it. And basically, a lot of the people who are popular now are wittingly or unwittingly ripping off what Nicolette originally did. That's
Isn't vaporwave in and of itself kind of a ripoff of like the early 90s like 3D
Yeah, it is.
glitch art aesthetic? So I don't know how much of like a
Everything is a ripoff of everything, technically.
totally. Yeah, so you're kind of like ripping off this postmodern early 90s like 3D digital art aesthetic and calling it something else. And it's cool, don't get me wrong, it's totally cool. This isn't like, I don't have a ton of experience in this kind of space.
Well, I think that's why let's just be more future focused now, because I think vaporwave, it describes things that are difficult to speak about, intergenerational things, economic things, social tension. It's a certain generation putting pent up social tension on a computer screens in an ironic way. That's like an in-joke. So it kind of like dateism was an in-joke. You know,
kind of like what?
A dateism.
Dadaism?
Yeah.
Oh.
Like that was like ironic and like tearing things down around them and recycling stuff. You know, I put it in that bracket. But I think we need something like a future focused discussion on the technology we're going to build, because say your solution to it was helpful, Eric, but it's pushing Nicolette's art down institutionalized routes when the art itself is making fun of those kinds of things in and of itself. So yeah, and then you put it up in those galleries, and then they describe it as a ripoff of a ripoff of a ripoff, and you end up with some kind of boomer academic who isn't actually interested in the message because the message is too hurtful to his sense of self-identity. And then that's sort of what's wrong with art already. And I think what blockchain art can really start to break is there's a lot of people in the art scene or just industry media scenes in general, they're too untouchable and they're too immune to criticism. Whereas the whole point of art and music and all video, film is to gaming now. Gaming, why we like gaming so much is because gaming is the only medium of art where you can actually say outrageous things now. Where you can actually tell a story that's somewhat true to life, which is why, and then people say, oh, Gen Z kids, they're going into their own world. But like, gaming is the only arena where like you can have like Norm Macdonald type humor, for example. Whereas Norm Macdonald's been Norm Macdonald's really popular with Gen Z, and he does manage to stay relevant because he's so funny and he's so good. But he's way better than anyone on SNL has been for like 10 years. So I'm essentially saying like vaporwave is about institutional factors that we can't speak about, basically, and the merge of, I think vaporwave is a great genre to merge into blockchain because vaporwave speaks to the kinds of things that blockchain can solve. That's sort of my opinion on it.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you're looking to tokenize your work, there are, a number of companies that exist that can help you do that. Like there's the whole rare art scene based in New York that is sort of champions this type of work. There's you know, like companies like Super Rare and Dada.nyc. What else? Snark.net is another company that they work with individual artists to craft like kind of bespoke solutions. But I mean, if you're trying to do kind of like a Rare Pepe type thing, where you're kind of just selling images and they're collectible and they're attached to a token, that community is all about this. You know, kind of being an insurgent on their idea of the art world is totally their thing. And they are super supportive of different types of kind of art that operates outside of the institution, so to speak. But a lot of them don't really come from an art background. They're mostly engineers. And you know, the people that tend to be attracted to that, you know, you have to be kind of careful, I think, because they're not necessarily interested in having a very heavy discourse about the art itself. They're mostly interested in the transactional aspects of it. You know, so you find things like Rare Pepe is like hugely popular in that community, which is fine if that's what you're into. I'm not personally interested in that outside of the kind of analyzing the broader implications for why we're trading hyper-fascist frog memes. But that may be a good opportunity to, you know, find a platform. There's a Telegram group called, I think, Decentralized Art. It's run by this group, Jessica Angel runs it. You want me to write that down?
Yeah, that would be great.
Art on Telegram, Jessica Angel. These folks, you know, I know a bunch of these people. They, you know, it's funny. There was been about 2 waves of blockchain art startups. I was part of the kind of original chain, like back in like the 2015. We launched a project called movingpictures.gallery. This was kind of along the lines of we were working with Ascribe.io, and there was Monograph in New York. Ascribe was in Berlin. You know, I think the rhetoric initially was really utopian, and it was all about empowering artists and making things happen that weren't previously possible, like, you know, resale royalties. So in other words, you know, you sell an artwork and then you leverage your career and that artwork becomes more valuable, you know, you should be entitled to a certain percentage of the resale value of that artwork. And so it kind of creates a sustainable income model for artists as they get older, you know, when they've kind of hit mid-career and you're middle-aged and, like, you know, you've sold all this work and it's worth all this money, but you're not really participating in any of that value in the secondary market. But I found that there's certain libertarian voices that have sort of risen to the fore there, and the tone has become overtly hostile, I guess, to anything that isn't free market oriented.
Yeah.
So I don't know what your political interests are, or, you know, what your you just have to be careful when you go into that space, because that is what they're doing now. They've kind of internalized this libertarian free market ethos. But on the outside, it's like very supportive. Like literally anything you post in this group, people are going to go like ooh and ah over, right? And so it's kind of got, and like especially after the crypto market tanked, the people that were sort of left in that space are people that do generally seem to believe in what they're doing, or because they're still doing it, like they're not really making any money off of it. So that's good. So yeah, I mean, I would suggest maybe checking them out. I mean, this group, I don't think that we have anything to offer you as far as helping you re-platform yourself. But I can definitely point you in the direction of places. I mean, like all the institutional spaces that I, you know, pointed you at, like they all started as outsider kind of insurgent organizations. And like some places like Rhizome, you know, they're embedded in a museum now and they're like a big deal. But like all this stuff started as kind of, you know, like for instance, there's something called New Aesthetic. New Aesthetic started as a Tumblr blog, you know, and it kind of grew to be this whole crazy thing with all these different people. I think like primarily my feeling is that the blockchain, the crypto art communities, they tend to use this idea of technological disruption. Like we're going to use technology to disrupt the status quo, to say that like art institutions are super exclusive and they need to be more inclusionary, and so we're going to disrupt them. We're going to take down these curators. But what they don't seem to realize is that you're actually a part of real artist communities. Like 95% of the spaces cater to queer, people of color, femme-identifying artists that are completely left out of any type of this sort of like high-level 1% like transactional
Then
stuff that's
maybe
happening.
that's why you end up with hyper-fascist frog memes circulating around in the free market a lot, you know? I mean, it's just the art at the ground level becomes a mirror reflection of just what's going on at the top. And there's a lot of people who feel left out of that too. I mean, it's just the way it is. You can say you're inclusive, but you're actually not, because you're calling a frog fascist when it means actually like a lot of different things. So I think there's generally like a communication gap as to what is actually going on. Like not all of it, some of it is, but not all of it is. Some vaporwave is fascist, but not all of it is.
Totally. I mean, all I can tell you is this group, like my vision for what we're doing here, is explicitly against all of this. My explicit goal is to destroy crypto art. I hate crypto art, and I'm gonna completely ruin it.
Yeah, I hate I don't like what it is now precisely for a lot. I think there's a lot of free market zealotry, and all that ends up just becoming a descent into lowbrowism and kind of what I call like dildo libertarianism, where they're just selling like short-term dopamine hits, like the most offensive meme in a token, and then it sells, and then, you know, it's the same as social media. It's just trying to get that dopamine kick of being super offensive or very lewd, or I like, because that's kind of why we probably can't help now with Nikki getting re-platformed, and probably a community like this, similar enough to Facebook, that you'd actually probably understand what was going on and could navigate it. But I think it's important. What I like about what you're doing is, like, we're both very irreverent about the status quo, and you're taking a cerebral view, number one being with our chain and looking at the blockchain 3.0, 4.0, and then how can we build a more kind of a better engineered solution for everyone. So I especially think for artists, if you're going to make art that's critical of technology and critical of the social technology, it's the best art is going to come from someone who has a mind of where we're going. So I think, as well as being into the blockchain and stuff, like you could provide, like, this meeting for Nicolette and being involved in the group with some clever people who understand the technological problem would help frame her thinking to, one, make better art, and kind of two, make better career decisions and like future.
Totally. I mean, like, look, you guys, I mean, Nicolette, you are more than welcome to start attending blockchain art. I just want to be clear that, like, this isn't a platform that's going to help promote your work, really.
Yeah.
This is more of a think tank, right? And so as long as you understand that, please, like, come, like, we welcome you with open arms. Please come and hang out with us. We're just like a bunch of nerds, and we sit around talking about nerdy shit every week. And sometimes we build stuff, right? The orientation, ultimately what we're building, ultimately the thing that we're building is going to help you, right? It's going to help everybody, because it's not just about art, it's about the future of digital property. and creating a distributed platform that anyone can use. Part of the problem with all these crypto art startups is they're all trying to cash in on this idea of digital property by putting their own, how do you say, their own branding on the process. So in other words, if you can edition your art through Rare Art, right? But now you're on the hook to pay them indefinitely every time you make a transaction with that art, right? They're taxing you for access to something which in theory should be free. And so we're thinking about how we can make this readily accessible so people that aren't rich can access the tools for digital property in and of itself. Now, the way we're going about this is in kind of this really theoretical way, because I see it as a platform in and of itself to make art. Like, art is a good platform for exploring what the sort of pushing up against the edges of what's possible here. So here, I'm going to send you guys a link to something. This is going to be, you have to keep this on the DL because I haven't announced it yet. Is this the thing? No, wait, I emailed myself. This was today. No. Oh, here we go. There's like 3 different bodies of work in here. One of which is like the distributed art object framework. And then I created a fake blockchain art startup called Normcorp, which in and of itself is an art object. And I'm writing right now, like kind of outlining what are the methodologies that you use to substantiate value and communicate that value. And how does that become a sculpture, a monochrome, a corporate monochrome? But yeah, and I mean, I guess it depends on what you're interested in. I mean, it sounds to me like you're interested in finding just an audience for your stuff right now. Is that true?
I mean, it's not just about audience. I just want to learn more about what you guys are doing, and because I didn't really know about blockchain and cryptocurrency before I met Patrick.
Cool.
Well, I also think like Nicolette is a good test case for me, because Nicolette is like precisely the kind of person that probably in the relatively near future, from the conversation I've been having, we're going to need to reach out to, like future focused, young, popular, intelligent, wants to change things, has experienced a lot of the socioeconomic problems firsthand in quite a bad way. So, you know, if we can get Nikki involved and interested on her level, and that'll probably take some patience from both sides, it will then definitely help the stuff with Daryl in terms of like communicating to the wider audience of what we're doing and who it appeals to and sort of why
who's we? Like, you're talking about our song, or you're talking about our chain?
I'm talking about sort of our chain more broadly, because I think digital property is a huge thing, especially with our space, where Greg was saying you can search for digital content by its features. You know, that opens up to engineering, you know, music searching in whole new ways. You know, I think there's a number of unique value points, and Greg tries to communicate them on the Rcast, but you have to listen to like 24 hours of Rcast, and then you get like 10 gems, but you have to like search through a pile of horse dung to find the rubies, and not everyone's prepared to do that, you know. Whereas I think if we involve more kind of generally talented people in our conversations, not all the time, but just make a habit of doing that, it will help a lot of other things in terms of, you know, what are people picking up on in terms of what we're speaking. And, you know, then with the website, we can reframe the website in terms of what is our chain, what is it going to make you capable of doing. what can you do with our chain that you can't do with other things?
Yeah,
Right.
I mean, I think it's funny. I was thinking about this a little bit. I mean, because our chain's problem is its public image at this point. Like, it's completely blown its opportunity. I mean, it's kind of blown its public image as being sort of a reliable organization that has its act together. And yeah, there's people here, the people that are still around are here because they really believe in the technology, and that the ideas behind the technology are really valid. And I think that's really compelling. I mean, Jim last week was talking a bunch about this idea of our chain issuing a currency, you know, for like something like kind of like a time banking type project. And, you know, how do you, it sort of ties in with this idea of art and value. Whereas, you know, among artists, like every like 10 years, 15 years, you know, there's kind of a new crop of artists that come up, right? And eventually they're outsiders initially, but then eventually within like a 20-year time frame, they become institutional. How does that happen, right? And part of the way that happens is they form a collective and they start collecting each other's work. And by them collecting and giving each other's work value, throwing shows for each other, the institutional players start paying attention, and that work gets elevated over time, you know, as these artists get older and they start being able to really articulate their vision in new ways. Maybe they go to grad school, whatever. But the point here is that the community in and of itself issues its own value, and that's what initially creates the value. And I think part of the problem is that you guys are looking for people outside of our chain to sort of acknowledge that this is value and like this is going to be worth something. And I think that's a really hard sell right now. You already have a bunch of people that are like, we believe this thing has value. And what they have to do is believe that Rev has value in and of itself, and that's tradable for our time, right? And because if Jim issues a token that's worth 1 hour of my time, and basically he's paying me to work on his project, or I'm paying him to work on art and blockchain, that in and of itself, that belief that this technology has merit and that it's worth my time, that's basically all we need. And we start doing that, rather than constantly trying to position this as like something that's public facing, more people will come into the fold and be attracted to that because we already have a functioning economy, even if it's just for the actual time that we're spending working on these issues. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I would agree. I think the danger with that is, with all the money that's been printed, the halvening coming up, I think there, and knowing the crypto space as I do, there's going to be another hype cycle. Okay, I fully expect Rev to get listed, and new influencers pop up. They want to find their niche. They come and find out about us. They punt it on exchanges, make videos about it, and very quickly, especially with Rev trading around what it is at the moment, it could very easily go to $1 or $2 or $3. And, you know, then we're going to get VC people, and then they're going to want to regiment us. And, you know, we're going to get institutional money involved. Okay. And unless, and then they're going to tell us, and people are going to start selling out like they did last time. Okay. As soon as a VC turns up with a suitcase full of money, people are like, yeah, I love our chain, but I love a suitcase full of money more. And then we'll start getting bossed about and being told what our public image is and what we're building. Like what happened last time with Pythia and Reflective. We'll get told what startups we're building. Many people will drop out of this community thing and jump into bed with the VCs, and then they'll plow through another $50 million and we'll be back at square one again. So I think we all have a responsibility to ourselves to like position ourselves, and if we do really believe in this kind of community stuff, take responsibility for what that messaging is, and make the cost higher for a VC to come in and buy the thing out and tell everyone what to do. Because that's kind of what happened the last time. Like, everyone sold out. It's like, now we don't have any money. Of course, we'll just work for each other because, you know, that's all we have. But I think we just need to be careful, you know, how you know, everything has a price point. I'm a rare breed in that I'm impossible to buy out. People have put millions on the table in front of me and I've said no many times in my life. But a lot of the people involved in this, and a lot of people in life, they've never experienced that. They can say all they like, and I've seen the most moral people ever bought out for a very low price, in my opinion. So that would be my counter argument, but I do think you make a valid point. But
Well, I mean, in a way, isn't like I ultimately agree with you 100%. I mean, and so I think what I'm proposing is similar to what you're saying, is that you create a structure that makes it more difficult to sell your shares on an open exchange. Like in a way, I'm actually not interested, or I think there's got to be some thing like one of the things that I've been thinking about. We haven't been talking a lot. We were initially talking a lot about this here. Is this idea of art and community currencies, right? Because in my experience, you know, a lot of the art that does get made doesn't happen on an individual level. Like it happens in these alternative art spaces that are community driven, right? Like they're not for profits, or they're just like DIY punk spaces, you know. And so how do you create a way of financing those spaces so they can continue to exist without subjecting them to the free market, you know, and like the speculation economy? Because it's like I've met guys that are like, we're making DAOs for like LGTB, you know, community spaces, and I'm like, you're gonna get these kids funded by these, you know, shark ass like crypto investors, and then what are they gonna do? They're gonna short these like queer kids and like trying to have a community. It's like, fuck you, you know. And they were like these Silicon Valley bros, you know, and I'm like, no, this isn't right. This isn't right. This isn't how you do this. You're not a part of these spaces. You don't know these people. What in the fuck do you think you're doing, right? And so part of this is about protecting real community spaces as cooperatives from being shorted by the market, right? And so internally, there needs to be some type of circular economy. We were talking, you know, with Michael Linton about this, and he was kind of giving us, I guess, part of a model, at least, for how one could issue a potential circular currency, you know, that maybe doesn't have value outside of the community in which it's issued. Like, so I've actually been developing a model for a distributed autonomous punk space. It's like one of the things I'm interested in is like, how do I help 50 of my totally dysfunctional, brilliant, but, you know, totally like contrarian experimental music friends in New York run a space in a prohibitively expensive real estate market, right? And so can we use locally issued currency? Can we use liquid democratic frameworks? Can we create a type of cooperative DAO so the space can eventually buy itself off the market, you know? Similar to like the Terra Zero model that those Germans developed. These are the things I'm interested in. I haven't pulled the trigger. I live in Buffalo now, and I'm actually just wrote a proposal to see if we can do this locally here in Buffalo, where there's like a little bit less risk because the real estate market's kind of like not as crazy as New York City. I mean, but so fundamentally, I think there's two things here, right? Like you have the like actual living costs of the people developing our chain, which need to be reimbursed somehow, right? But then there's kind of this whole problem of like dealing with VCs, which is inherently problematic because they want 10x and they want like, you know, they want to sell your ass out in 3 to 5 years. And so you can't make more ethical decisions that way, right? And yet like the first round of community fundraising, you know, by releasing their own currency didn't work either because you're still putting out a fucking free market. What do you think is going to happen with these guys, you know? Of course they're going to sell your ass out, you know?
Of course. I think there's some
Jim is probably disagreeing with me right now. Jim doesn't like this because Jim wants the free market. Jim likes the free market.
I think there's some kind of happy medium where we make a deal, but
let's make a fucking deal over here.
Yeah. Well, I went to get this book, Diego Gambetta, The Sicilian Mafia, and it's basically the business of private protection, which is a business of trust and essentially physical force. It's a great book. Diego Gambetta is like the only economist that goes into the economics of asymmetric information and signaling systems in economies. Brilliant guy. And you can
wait, what's the name of that? Wait, write the name of that book in the thing. I want to. The Sicilian.
Okay.
read
Well,
that.
I'll write the name of the author. He has two great books. One's about the Sicilian Mafia, which is very famous, and then the other one is about information theory applied to how people market and sell contraband goods. And then he kind of puts the two together. It's
What's his name?
and more chaps. I will type it here. Diego Gambetta. There we go. So I think essentially what we need to build is some kind of protection system for ourselves and to set our stall out so that we deal with VCs the same as we deal with speculators, the same we deal with community people. We kind of have a criteria and we'll mentor you, but this is what you have to do in return. Like, you know, make to kind of enforce a reciprocity and a trust. And I think this sort of ties in with the public facing marketing is like, this is who we are. And then if you want to make a deal with us, then this is how it's going to work. Essentially, that to me is like an extension of just getting the web page right and kind of starting to bring new people into the group and things.
Oh, can I share? Can I screen share with you for a second? I created a diagram for this. Can I share my diagram?
Oh yeah, please do.
Yeah, hold on. Here we go. This is my diagram that explains this. Can you see that? So we need to protect the bunnies, right? And so we got the bunnies, and we got a magic force field, and then we've got the motherfucker wolves over here, and fuck you, wolf, you're a fucker. And so we have a magic force field, and we've got a drawbridge that lets us interface with the wolves without interfering with the livelihoods and lives of the bunnies.
I agree with this economic model. It's good.
Yeah, it's a good model, right?
Deserves an award. Absolutely.
So one of the things, I won't bring you through this whole thing, but one of the things that we're interested in, or I mean, I'm interested in, I've been advocating here, is this idea of smart contracts and soft unionism. So one of the interests of mine is in platform capitalism and how we can create platform cooperatives. I mean, and that's like initially kind of what I thought ArtChain was. I mean, they're loosely associated with the platform cooperatives movement in New York that Trevor Schultz is running. Jim came out for that conference in November. But basically the idea is that, you know, we can't really, in America, it's really difficult to unionize, especially as knowledge workers and creatives, because they use something called the Sherman Act. It's like a law that was passed to break up monopolies in the early 20th century. And now they use it to basically bust unions and prevent anyone from forming any type of meaningful union here. And so the idea of creating a DAO or like a smart contract and that we all agree as digital artists to mediate our labor through, it enables us to unionize in a way that's not pursuant under US law. Whereas in Europe, it's a lot easier to do this, and they have organizations that have sprouted up like SMART, which is fabulous. They're like the freelancers union with claws. You know, they'll actually chase your employers down for money if they don't pay you, if you're like a freelance designer or whatever. We don't have that. What this idea of smart unionism does is it basically, if I know all of these digital artists spread out all over America, and they're all exhibiting in galleries, and they have institutional shows, and they're embedded as academics in different places, they start editioning their work in this way. And the definition, because art, one of the things, just sort of the more academic things that I've been doing research on, is this idea of art as a contract. So back in like the mid 20th century, when art stopped being about physical objects, you know, it could be like an idea, it could be a performance, it could be a video, it could be, you know, a land work, right? How do you define this? And so it was, the legal system came into play to help define the nature of what the artwork was. And I've been explaining this, these guys have heard this multiple times from me already, so I apologize everybody else. basically, once you realize that, there was something that was created in 1971 called the Artists Reserved Rights and Transfer Sale Agreement. This was a document that was created by Seth Sieglob and Robert Projansky to protect conceptual artists in the market, and it instituted things like art resale royalties, exhibition royalties, power of veto, and this has never really been enforceable in America. But in a way, it defines the nature of what the work is and then creates a rights management system to help mediate that. So what we're doing here is trying to encode that into a rolling smart contract. So it not only is the work defined within this framework, but it's the definition of the artwork is tied in with its rights management system. So if an unscrupulous collector tries to go around the system, right, and it completely invalidates the nature of what the work is, right? So I am working with smart contracts in and of themselves as the actual art, right? Like I'm not trying to take images or videos and necessarily sell them via a smart contract. I mean, that could be part of it, but ultimately definition of what the work is, how does the work get collected? How does the work get restored over time? So if I sell a video and it's 2020, how does that video get updated in 2035 when like video codecs and everything's totally changed, right? Archivism is like a huge problem when it comes to digital art. So we're kind of putting this whole thing together and saying, all right, first step is taking something like a video or a digital image, selling it via this rights management system, right? But getting everyone on board to do it. And then what that does is it kind of from the ground level works its way up the food chain until everyone has to participate in this system. And it's a completely open set of protocols that we're not necessarily making money off of, right? As opposed to the other crypto art startups. Does that make sense?
Makes a lot of sense. Really good stuff. Thanks, Eric.
One of the more interesting things about art is that an artist can revoke the work, which is unlike other asset classes. Like if I have a work going on sale at Sotheby's and like some, I don't know, unscrupulous, awful human is going to buy my work, I can actually revoke that artwork and say I can disown it and say that's not my art anymore, and that art becomes worth nothing. This is not something that exists in other asset classes, which is again why art is unique as opposed to the other things that people are trying to do with smart contracts and different forms of asset ownership, right? Yeah, whatever. I'll stop now. I have to go in a few more minutes. Do you guys have any other questions?
No, it was very informative. Is there any background reading we can have on this group for next time? So we're not kind of making you present stuff all over again that people have seen before.
Well, I'm going to be publishing like a book on all of this in a few weeks. But right now, there's a Medium article that I put online that I can send to you.
Brilliant.
That just what it does is it goes over the basic premise of the distributed art object framework.
Mm-hmm.
And so that maybe will help explain it. And you guys, when we meet next week, if you guys have specific questions about that, I can answer them.
Well, and I definitely think in terms of this unionized workforce for artists idea, for the gaming industry, this would be so powerful as well, because game developers, graphic artists are treated really, really badly at the moment. The work conditions are terrible. And there's a lot of people like Theo trying to break out into the open source game development world, but it's really tough. It's a really tough soil to till.
And you know what's crazy? I was on the phone yesterday with my buddy who's in Seattle, who's a VFX developer and like an XR interface guy. Netflix just released their own visual effects engine. So now, as a freelance, you're not going to be working for production houses anymore. You're going to be working directly for Netflix. That's fucking crazy. They're trying to completely disintermediate the visual effects industry. That's bonkers. That's like so. I mean, but like the thing is, it already wasn't good. Like it was already super exploitative, And so now you're just going to be exploited by like the main company, but they're probably not going to pay you more than like whatever shit ass production company you're working
Yeah,
for,
well, that's,
right?
and so many of actually these blockchain concepts and technology concepts are just about making the problem worse. They ostensibly say, oh, we're freeing up the market and what have you, but you end up with this Dutch auction situation where people just end up selling themselves into slavery through desperation.
That's the free market. I mean, that's literally the free market. That's how it works, right?
I think the free market plus how the technology turned out does do that, but it runs in cycles. And you know, I think what our chain is doing, and definitely what you're doing, Eric, you have some really wonderful ideas. I'm looking for the longbow. I'm looking for the thing that levels the playing field just enough to give enough of a section of the population a fighting chance. And I think no matter whether we call it capitalism or what this or that, that's how human society is throughout history anyway.
All right,
You know,
so it's kind of like this. You know what we need right now? You know what our chain needs to do is they need to stop thinking in such general terms. They
yeah,
should develop one use case. Let's say our chain decided, hey, Eric, we think you're a genius, and we're gonna start working on your project exclusively. Great. And you know why? Because that will actually get them more traction than anything else that they think they're doing, right? What we need is sharding. We need sharding and we need zero cost storage.
agreed.
Once we have sharding and zero cost storage, then there's a solution that you can actually sell to people, right? And that's providing a real thing that they need. The problem is blockchain is so, it's like, it disintermediates everything. And so you get a bunch of generalists that are trying to disrupt everything. And it's kind of like Discord, right?
Yeah.
Like I love Discord. Since the whole coronavirus thing, I exclusively hang out on Discord now because I can't fucking stand Facebook, right? Now, Facebook has the network effect. I can't get all of my friends to leave Facebook and go on Discord, but these guys are on Discord and I like these guys, so I hang out on Discord and I hang out in our chain, right? I'm on another VR performance venue called hoops.net. There's a bunch of cool people in there, so I hang out in there. We're doing something productive. It's project-based. You're not going to be able to disrupt Ethereum. You're not going to be able to disrupt Bitcoin. You can't compete with these people. But what you can do is get a specific project use case.
The one thing that you do 10 or 100 times better than anyone else, and just focus on that. I'm reading this book, Special Operations and Strategy from World War II to the War on Terrorism. Wow. There's a very good politics, philosophy, economics course at the local university, and they train civil servants here for the British government. So they have a very good bookshop. And anyway, so the chapter 2 starts with, the concept of the center of gravity suggests that a nation's ability to fight can most readily be unhinged by seeking out one pivotal element of its force that, if destroyed, would cause the rest of its force to collapse. So that's saying the nature of special operations is to go for the throat or the brain. So this chapter 2 is essentially about going for the brain. And I think we need like what you're saying. We're kind of fighting a war in a way, and we're kind of like a special operations team. Like all the odds are stacked against us. We should never win politically. All the lobbyists are against us, and we kind of have to think about like what are these like 1 or 2 things that we attack, and like what do we build to go after them, and like relative to what makes us unique and what our talents are and what's good about our technology, rather than trying to do everything all at once. I think Daryl was a bit guilty of that, saying we're going to build a VR space and it's going to be like Facebook, but it's going to be different to Facebook and everyone's just going to be able to do whatever they want. Like, no, we just need to say we're going to just, what's like the one thing we do better than everyone else. I definitely think this digital property thing is amazing, because with the R space plus R-Chain digital property, you can use it for multiple high-value use cases, art, music, engine especially.
But so far, I mean, Ned has been coming into these meetings and telling us that it's going to be prohibitively cost expensive to store media. So like, it's like, yeah, we can store media on the primary node, but it's going to be a ridiculous amount of money. And artists, we don't have that type of money to store the thing. We need private, like, this is what we need. We need a private shard that 30 artists can hold together. We each spin up our own server on whatever, right? And then we're able to run our own nodes that we're co-storing each other's art. Now, my preference is to do this on IPFS. But I mean, if our chain could actually spin something out that can do this, so we can run our own private node that's basically, and then if I sell my work to a collector, the collector spins up a node that's also co-storing like all of this media, right? From this group of it's like, you know, I'm embedded in this community called the Real-Time Media. It's a video art community in New York. It's international, but it's like people creating interactive video signal processing, like noise stuff. And, you know, those artists should be collecting each other's work. If we can create a way for them to edition it, all of a sudden that creates institutional precedent, right? And that work becomes worth an extraordinary amount of value, right? Over time. And now all of a sudden, really worthwhile digital assets are being stored on our chain. They're being streamed through our chain. It's going to generate all this forms of traffic, right? But the issue is it can't be cost prohibitive for the artists, right? It has to protect them.
Well, yeah. Well, I think we'll have to think about what kinds of media are low cost and what are high. It's probably just a case of the more megabytes, the more expensive it's going to be, and then maybe limit.
Yeah, video, man. Digital video is really intense, you know?
But you could still create kind of interactive things in DAPI, like some kind of interactive art that's more 2D would be possible. Because you can do like a WordPress site on our chain, whereas you can't do that on Ethereum.
Yeah, but
so
here's the thing.
We've got more bandwidth.
Here's the fundamental thing. What we don't want is to create and this is where all the other crypto art people are getting it wrong. You don't want the medium of the blockchain or a token to constrain the idea of what the art is. It's the other way around. Art has to push against the constraints of what the blockchain is. That's why I'm saying I personally am interested in using the blockchain in and of itself, right, as the medium. But if you talk to 10 different video artists, right, each of them is going to tell you that the locus, the point where their work exists, is something different. Even though you have 10 videos, there's a completely different conceptual framework at place, right? Maybe it's a performance. Maybe the performance that the video is documenting is the work. Maybe it's a piece of code that generated that artwork, right? Maybe it's like an analog circuit that created that work. Now, maybe it's that video is in and of itself the artwork, but maybe it was the system that created it. Maybe it was something, you know what I mean? You never know. And like the blockchain art stuff all constrains those concepts into just being a flat 2D thing.
Yeah, well, any engineering will set constraints on what you can do. I think, say with Ethereum, it costs like $500 to store the data that's in a picture on chain. Whereas with our chain, we're taking that down by a factor of 100 or more. So we can store more data, but no matter what you use, you're going to be in some sense constrained by the system, and to achieve what you want, you're going to have to go off system to some degree, and then it's
sharding. Sharding.
Yeah, whether it's running up your own nodes or cross-chain transactions, sharding, maybe having physical art with RFID tags on the back or barcodes, yeah, I mean, the nature of the beast of any sort of engineering project is, you know, that's why I like art mixed with engineering, because engineering says like, these are the limits, and then artists are always like, no, I want to color outside the lines. I want to just go crazy with it. So it's like the kind of chaos plus the rigor of thinking about the problem. I enjoy that.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's what this conversation mostly has been like me being like, why can't we do this? And then everyone's like, oh, I don't know, Eric, that's hard. I'm like,
well, normally, like, I think I'm quite good at, mediating those kinds of discussions, I think. So I'd quite like to join in on this call in future.
Please,
Theo,
yeah.
oh, Theo, you've been quite quiet. Do you?
Yeah, I'm more about like technical aspects of things. Like, for example, when you talk about storing large amounts of data instantly, things like how much can we store before we run out of storage? Like, it's a technical issue that we can't actually deal with right now. I mean, there are certain ways we can deal with the issue, but we have to sacrifice something else. For example, we can store a big video file, right? But we can sacrifice like the download time. So we can say like we know it's in there in the blockchain, like it's being transferred in the protocol, but we can't access it yet. Like it's gonna take a bit of time before we can get the whole file back. But we know it's there. It's somewhere there, like in some nodes. It's so yeah, like you have to think about it like in technical terms, like what can we do now, and then maybe possibly we can do it better next time, like when we actually have the tech.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, I mean, I think in the immediate future, I mean, the thing that we were sort of talking about was spinning up our own test node, right? For specifically for storing content, where we set the rules so there's no transaction cost.
But there are no guarantees that they will be up and running all the time. Like it's up to you to keep it running.
Well, yeah, but we spin it up on the.
It's up to artists.
If we spin it up on the cloud, yeah, it'll be running all the time, but we have to paying for it, basically. But yeah, no, this is super interesting problem. You know, interested, like, right, the thing I think that we've been working on for the past couple of weeks is figuring out on a technical level, encoding the artist rights and transfer sale agreement. Jim's been coding it into Rolling, which is a document which I'll share with you guys. It's basically, again, like a legal document that protects artist rights. And we're figuring out how do we combine that with DID and how do we make it so it's programmably, it makes sense, as well as legally enforceable. And how do we sort of translate the language of this document into a rolling contract so it still has the same content, but functions across these ways. I've been learning about object capabilities, which I'm still very fuzzy on. I've been trying to follow some of the materials from, what's his name, Gary? ERTP.
Mark Miller.
And stuff like that. So I've been peppering Gary mostly with my idiotic questions about object capabilities.
I'm also new to this concept, but I'm gonna see it as if you have pointer to the object, which is like an unforgeable name that only you know, then you can do whatever you want with it. Like you can actually decide, like if you want to, what operations do you want to perform on the object, and you can also transfer those rights to another object.
Yeah.
So that belongs to someone else, and they can do whatever they want with that object. So you can actually transfer the rights as it was an object.
If you think of a unforgeable name giving just one capability, you'll understand object capabilities better. When you create an object, you may give an admin capability, which is more than one thing. You may also give a public capability, which you can give to anyone, or you can define as put in the registry so that anybody can access it. The capability is ultimately should be really fine-grained so that I can give you a capability to do just one thing, okay? Without, so you're not giving away the store. Okay, when you give away the store, that's more like an ambient capability. That's not considered to be secure. If you get a pointer and you can do anything with it. That's
Yeah, that's like one aspect I'm still not used to when it comes to ERTP, like the security aspect of it. Like, can I actually send an unforgeable name and kind of expect that person doesn't share it with someone else? Like, is it possible?
it's impossible. And
Or if they only they have the
and
key.
in the notion of object capabilities, it's considered that if you give someone a capability, they can delegate that to a program or to another person or to whatever. You can't letting people delegate responsibility is a positive thing in many ways. But
When you delegate,
you can always require a signed message, or you can, have a one-time capability. So I give you the ability to do this once. That's it. So once, rather than doing a persistent read on that capability, I just do a single read on it, and it's a one-time capability. And
I'm still kind of not used to how it's tied to your wallet. Like, can someone else transfer that capability to someone? Like,
yeah,
it's kind of hard to explain right now.
It's not tied to your wallet. It's not tied to your wallet at all. Okay, I guess.
Are there any guarantees that only the person you send it to has access to it?
Yeah, the only way you can do that is if in the method you require a signed message that from a particular person, from a particular account. You require a signed message, then you're restricting it to a person. But there's a problem with that, and it's not more. It turns out to be not more secure. Now, if you give me the capability to do something, and I don't have time to do it, and I let my wife do it, I'm still the one who's responsible, right? You don't get a guarantee that it's the person anyway, But it's another thing. There's times when you want to be sure of what account has access to, but that security model is archaic. It's unsafe. It's difficult. Managing it is a nightmare. It's one of the problems with Ethereum, and one of the things that's brought a lot of people into our chain is that the capability model, security model, is the basic model, and we also have Rev wallets. Okay, and we have a deployer ID that when we deploy a message, we sign it, and that provides access to a wallet. And we're looking at doing the same thing with our community currency. We're tying that to wallets, where you can still put some in a purse and give somebody the capability to spend the purse. Then it doesn't matter who has the purse, they can spend it.
Mm-hmm.
So a purse is more like so So an artist could make, say, 50 prints of a digital art, and then put that digital art in as something like a purse, and then give an agent or a seller permission to sell from that collection without exchanging.
Right, there would be a contract, okay?
Yeah.
The digital right transfer agreement that
Mhm.
would have this purse full of art objects, whatever, or, you know, edition, what do they call them? Editions, whatever, and yeah, and then they could sell out of that. If you gave them if they had the basically a buy or sell capability for that contract.
Give people capabilities, and you could also set up so you can revoke them. So maybe
Right.
fall out, and then you're like, okay, well, you don't have that capability. This is amazing. Well, probably that's enough to think on for now. I think, yeah, we've gone for an hour and a half, but that has been very eye-opening for me anyway. How about you two? Theo, Nikki, how do you feel?
Yeah, I mean, it makes me think, like, what else do we need to consider when we're dealing with art? Like, I was thinking, like, more maybe like source code, like how do you prove that you actually made that piece of work? Because someone else can actually duplicate it and make it their work, like, and sell it like as their own. But like, you know, seem like they can just create a different account, like, and seem to be the artist and try to sell their work.
Instead of a copyright, what you have is an immutable ledger, and you can see who put the art there first, right? He's the one that owned it.
Yeah, but if it's slightly different, how do you like see if it's the same art or not? Like, you can't just hash it and compare hashes and see if it's the same or not.
The way we're looking at it, Eric's idea that the contract is the art, you know, carries a lot of the answers, I think, because, you know, anything you do to the contract I mean, yeah, of course, people can make recordings of our performance and things like that, and the standard rules would apply. But if you want to, I mean, what we are controlling is this contract.
Yeah, and you know, now they use various deep learning algorithms so that they can recognize derived or similar art on the internet. It's like I posted a little movie of our Christmas tree, and in the background it was playing a Christmas song, and YouTube cut off the noise, the sound, because it recognized that this was a copyrighted song that was playing in the background.
Yeah, but Google's algorithm or YouTube's algorithm proved to be like not reliable. You can even claim copyright on like pure noise.
Well, the idea is there are methods to make claims, you know, for, you know, misuse of copyrighted material, and this is easy to put into the contract. I mean, you know, my feeling is if people rip us off at first, it'll be more traffic generating than anything else. But once these works of art start having actual value, you know, the legal recourses will make themselves available.
All right, guys, I'm going to take off. Good to see you. And Eric would be better at answering that about copyrights. He's been in that arena for longer. But
Yeah, I might ask him next week.
yeah. All right. Bye-bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye,
Goodbye.
everyone.